chamber
Yeah,
dinner,
it's
so,
okay.
you know, dress, you know, a lot of people dress up, not like tuck sort of thing, but, you know, don't come in your Bermuda shorts.
Don't eat it.
But,
Well, no,
it's just kind of
the
a
longer ones go
meet,
quick.
and they have a
The
little
shorter ones take
guest
forever.
dinner, and
I've noticed that.
Because you guys don't like to talk. Then that's when you all want to talk.
presentation on
You don't want to talk during the long ones because you're like, all right, I want to get out of here. But the short ones, man, I gotta talk. And, okay.
The one coming up in March.
That's so this is
Really.
Fred, we're gonna go ahead and get started.
Evans.
Okay.
So that's downtown. Evans is over here in the east.
Okay.
There's
Hello. All right, I got you back on speakerphone. They still don't have it fixed, so we're gonna go ahead and get started here.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Mark.
Yep. All right. Ready on the left? Ready, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the regularly scheduled City Council meeting for February 21st, 2023. My name is Mark Clark, the mayor. I'll call the meeting to order. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Clark,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Castle,
Here.
Councilmember Spear,
Here.
Councilmember Johnson,
Present.
Councilmember Neal,
Present.
Councilmember Mortensen, here, and Councilmember Providence.
Present.
All right, next item on the agenda is a proclamation for the National Engineer Week. Whereas engineers use their scientific and technical knowledge and skills in creative and innovative ways to fulfill society's needs, and whereas engineers face the major technological challenges of our time, from rebuilding towns devastated by natural disaster, cleaning up the environment, and assuring safe, clean, and efficient sources of energy to design information systems that will speed our country into the future. And whereas engineers are encouraging our young math and science students to realize the practical power of their knowledge, and whereas we will look more than ever to engineers and their knowledge and skills to meet the challenges of the 21st century. Now, therefore, I, Mark Clark, Mayor of the City of Evans, do hereby proclaim the week of February 19th through February 25th, 2023 as National Engineers Week in the City of Evans. In witness hereunto, I have set my hand and caused the effect of the official seal of the City of Evans this 21st day of February 2023. And I believe Mark Overschmidt is here to receive this proclamation. So come on up.
Mike.
All right, next item on the agenda, audience participation. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to address City Council on any item that's not of a public hearing or on the agenda? If so, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. I knew you were going to start coming more often. You told me.
Good evening,
Good
Mayor
evening.
Clark, members of the council, Mr. Sims. My name is Carol LeMay. I live at 3601 Ponderosa Court in the Fox Crossing subdivision. The last time I was here 2 weeks ago, we talked about the city growth. And tonight I'd like to talk about income because it has to do with growth. There's no problem with property taxes because this city is growing exponentially with residential areas and everything, but I'd like to talk about sales taxes because 3 years ago, I, along with several of you on the city council and my friend Pat Clark, who's here with me tonight, all sat on a committee and worked diligently to get the 1% sales tax increase initiative passed in April 2020. The reason that it was passed, as you'll recall, is to help build city coffers to allow for maintenance of streets and construction of new areas and things like that. There's been no growth. The city tax, the state sales tax has not increased because there's been no growth. One of the things I asked for 2 weeks ago was for the city council and the city itself to consider grocery stores. I've been thinking about it, and I've realized that if we were to build grocery stores, one on the east end, one on the west end, we not only would have the people from Evans shopping here, we would have people from Milliken, LaSalle, Gilchrist, possibly Platteville, maybe Kersey, coming into Evans to shop rather than going into Greeley. And that would extend and grow the city coffers with sales tax. So I'm going to make this short. I'm not going to drag it out. I'm just going to implore the city to reach out to either Hayes Markets or Heritage Market and see if we can't get them to come into Evans. It would be the beginning of the real growth of the city of Evans. That's all I have for tonight. Thank you all very much for your time.
Well, I'll just speak on that real quick. We are all very well aware of that. We are desperately trying. So we are trying to reach out to find out where the market is to get somebody to come in and find a site to develop on. So we're with you 110%. It's just finding that niche on who wants to come in here and do that. So we agree wholeheartedly, 100%. We're trying. We're working. You know, hopefully with a lot of the changes that are going on, we're going to be a driver of economic development.
Well, we'd like to become a driving force in northern Colorado.
We do.
Yes.
We want to be. And that's why we are working due diligently with our staff and everything to get that happening. So,
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm shooting for Aldi's.
Is there anybody else in the audience that wishes to address City Council on any item not on the agenda or of a public hearing? Seeing none? All right, we'll move on. Next item, approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No, Mayor.
Okay. The only thing I did have a request on is to move number 5 for the public hearing to the first item and then number 4 down. So, but I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the agenda as mentioned.
I second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item, consent agenda. Item number 2, approval of the February 7, 2023 City Council meeting minutes. And item number 3, consideration of ordinance number 794-23, amending certain portions of the Evans Municipal Code to reflect the current adopted International Energy Conservation Code. Second reading.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item, item number 4, public hearing, consideration of resolution number 03-2023, approving a variance to decrease the minimum side yard setback from 30 feet to 25 feet for certain property located at 1572 44th Street for Bethro LLC in care of Dennis Johnson. I will open up the public hearing and we will hear from staff.
Angela Snyder, Community Development. I'll wait for the screen here, but the request is a variance to decrease the side setback in our industrial park on a property. Here, the property is 109 feet wide. This significantly limits the ability to place a building on the property. There are no minimum lot sizes in the industrial I-1 zone district, so this allowed the creation of a lot on which it is difficult to place a structure. Easements further complicate the placement, and a 40-foot wide building is a standard industrial building size. So once you start adding up the required drive lane, turning distance to get into the building, plus some easements to be considered, there was only 25 feet left on this east side. And I know that the applicant also has a diagram to show
Angela, that was the only thing that I got in that.
Okay. Okay. So there are 4 criteria that are required for a variance. The first one is that the approval of the variance will not jeopardize the health, safety, or welfare of any person. And so staff did not find anything to do with this, and the Board of Zoning Appeals agreed that that condition was met. The second criteria is that the variance is the minimum variance required to make reasonable use of the property. And as stated before, the 25 feet is that the minimum variance. The third is that that the circumstances are unique to this parcel. So the site is unusually narrow, and granting the variance will not confer special privilege upon the applicant, as several other lots in the industrial park have similar sized structures, but do not have the same easement and lot width difficulties. The last criteria is such practical difficulty and unnecessary hardship have not been unreasonably self-imposed by the applicant. The property owner bought a lot in an established industrial park, and so they did not impose this hardship themselves. The lot was already there. It is reasonable to assume that a lot in an industrial park should be able to be used for an industrial facility. The Board of Zoning Appeals did recommend approval of this variance request on January 24th, 2023. And as the minutes are attached, there was a discussion about perhaps staff should look at the setbacks and maybe 30 feet is too much. So that concludes my presentation. The applicant also has something.
If the applicant is here and if they have a presentation, if you'd like to come up or speak or do your presentation.
Okay, or maybe this was theirs.
All right. Is there any questions of the applicant and or staff? Mayor Pro Tem?
I have no questions.
All right.
So is the setback, changing the setback for the building or for a road to allow trucks?
It is the space between the building and the property line with the neighboring property. So normally it'd be 30 feet. The building would need to be 30 feet setback from the property line. And so they've asked for 25 feet just between the neighboring property to the east.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the question again.
Okay.
Is that difference in the space, is it going to be filled with drivable area or the building going to encroach on this?
So the building will encroach the 5 feet. See, if I show here, you can see this is the 30-foot line kind of going through the property, through the building. There's a little bit of 5 feet right here. The applicant's rep can confirm if this is correct, but I believe this is drainage area. So there will be no parking of equipment right here.
Okay, and then what is the type of this business? What business is it?
It's an industrial facility, so currently it's a fencing company, but
Okay.
it's the industrial zone, so it could be any company. You know, if they were not to be there, somebody else could move in.
Okay.
Any other additional questions for staff and or the applicant?
I have none.
Seeing none, okay. Because it's a public hearing, I would ask if there's anybody in the audience that wishes to come up and speak in favor of this or against it. If so, please come forward to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, and I'm sure there's no rebuttal from staff or the applicant, so I'm going to close the public hearing and council discussion.
So the reason why I was asking these questions is that you know, if there was, this is the industrial area, and if we're encroaching over towards another property and they're, you know, doing toxic chemicals or something, I wouldn't want to have it closer. Or if it's a main roadway, you know, the neighboring property, you know, I don't want it to impinge on that, but it seems like it's going to be a building, and we can't control what's going to happen in the future. We don't know, but at this point in time, it doesn't seem like it's a harmful industrial business. So I'm all for giving them the variance on this.
I would agree with that as well. Any other discussion, comments?
I have none. I agree.
Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve resolution number 03-2023 to grant the requested variance to 1572 44th Street.
Second.
I have a motion, a second, to approve resolution number 03-2023 to grant the requested variance to 1572 44th Street. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. All right, next item, public hearing, consideration of resolution number 04-2023, approving with conditions a special use permit request for outdoor storage in excess of 10% lot coverage, 23%, and an office for certain properties located at 1572 44th Street for Bethrol LLC in care of Dennis Johnson. I will open up the public hearing and hear from staff.
There's no PowerPoint?
This is the only thing I got for Johnson.
So, let me send something very quickly.
And then Liberty Drive.
So, the request is, this is the same property that we just heard from. It's Dennis Johnson, who is, running a fence business, but also has some other industrial uses of the facility. The site plan that we've considered is administratively approved because it's in our industrial park. The only portion of that that's coming before you today is for outdoor storage exceeding the 10%. So the applicant has requested to cover, I believe it is 23% of the property with outdoor storage. And so there are criteria to meet for the outdoor storage. The first one is that we have not uncovered any harm, health, safety, or welfare of the city and its residents. Number two would be that the development of the property in Evans Industrial Park provides economic benefit to the area and the city. The third one is that the proposal is consistent with all approved plans of record. The fourth one is the proposed industrial use of the site is compatible with surrounding land uses, which include outdoor storage, office, and vacant industrial properties. The site falls, number 5, the site does fall within the special flood hazard area. The proposed site design and structure meet the City of Evans FEMA requirements for development within the floodplain. The applicant is working on obtaining a floodplain development permit concurrently. The required water and quality ponds will be installed on the southern part of the site. No outdoor storage will be allowed to encroach on the pond area. And then number 6 is that the outdoor storage itself will not adversely affect traffic flow or parking in the neighborhood. All associated traffic and parking have been addressed in the site design. And number 7 is that the location of industrial uses within the industrial park do not constitute an overconcentration of like uses. And then the 8th criterion addresses specifically outdoor storage requirements, and that is that they would need to screen from public rights-of-ways and adjacent properties. Because of the way the site and the building situation is laid out, we have agreed to have them screen on the northern boundary of the property. There are already industrial buildings and fences surrounding the rest of the property that made adding more to it unnecessary. So at that January 24th Planning Commission, they did unanimously recommend approval of the special use permit. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll get them.
Great, thank you. Is there any questions of the applicant and or staff? Mayor Pro Tem?
No questions from me. Thank you.
Well, Councilmember Spear.
I have no questions. Anybody else? No. What's our definition of privacy fencing?
Ours is generally needs to be a 6 feet solid fence of some kind.
Okay, so
And depending on the zone district, it
wood,
depends on.
vinyl, non-see-through, like not chain link.
We also accept landscaping, and I know for this, because of their building, I believe that their screening is landscaping based.
You accept what? I did not hear you.
Landscaping too.
So, a privacy hedge?
Right. Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
I actually have a question regarding this. Have we granted any other variances or special use permits for outdoor storage in that area that exceed 10%?
Oh, yes, several.
We have, okay. Just wanted to. That's all I have for questions. Any other additional questions? Staff in there or the applicant? All right, if not, because it's a public hearing, if there's anybody in the audience that wishes to come up and speak for or against this item, please come up to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and any council discussion.
Again, my questioning about the privacy fencing is, I think that is a property owner, if you are having a privacy fence around whatever storage you have, so that it is not visible from the road, it's not an eyesore from the road, and it is also not an eyesore for your neighbors, decreasing their property value. I don't see a reason to not be allowed to have more storage than 10%. Where I do see a problem in the future, and I know that we've got code enforcement, is if it's, again, toxic storage, if vermin start habitating there, if it's trouble, the skunks and rats and whatever. But if it's a nice, clean storage area, I don't see any problem why they can't use more than even what it's designated in here. But if that's what they're willing to go for, that percentage, then I don't see a problem with it.
I would agree with that as well. And also, if you're increasing your outdoor storage area, 13%, that's probably a pretty good sign that your business is growing and doing well. So that's good and fantastic and stuff. But yeah, I'm in favor of this as well. So if there's no other council discussion, I would entertain a, go ahead, Fred.
I have a question.
No, we've already done questions.
Never mind.
All right. If there's no other council discussion, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve resolution number 04-2023 for a special use permit at 1772 44th Street for Bretho, I believe that's how you pronounce it, LLC.
Second.
I have a motion, a second, to approve resolution number 04-2023 for a special use permit at 1572 44th Street for Brethro LLC. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you. All right, next item, item number 6. Public hearing consideration of resolution number 082023, approving with conditions the Liberty Draw subdivision filing 1 final plat located south and adjacent to 37th Street and approximately 500 feet west of 35th Avenue. I will open up the public hearing and we will hear from staff.
Angela Snyder, Community Development. The application here is the final step for the first filing for the Liberty Draw subdivision, which is here located on the southwest corner. Oh, I believe this is the applicant's presentation. It's okay. I'll leave it up. Section 160690E of the Evans Municipal Code identifies the requirements for a final plat, and there really is just one criterion for a final plat. And it's a very big sentence that means, does it meet all the codes? Is it compliant with the preliminary plan that was already approved in 2022? And does it conform to our code? And then does it did it have any changes that were required for the public interest at the time of the preliminary plan? Well, thankfully, the application materials that were provided to us are in substantial compliance with the preliminary plan that was already approved. This is the first filing, so it's 1A, 1B, and 2 of the sections, and it encompasses 226 units, and I don't know where all my presentations are. And it's a mixture of single-family detached and attached houses. So the phasing plan will be part of the development agreement presentation that will come later. So that's the end of my presentation. I'll pass it on over to the applicant because I know they have their presentation.
All right, the applicants here would like to come up and do their presentation.
Good evening. Last time I was here, I spoke really fast. So tonight I'm going to go really slow.
I'm Mitch Nelson with Liberty Draw Land Developers. With me tonight I have...
Oops, is that better? I have
Yeah.
Zach, Cesar, and Andy Girk, and they're here to help me answer any questions that I can't. I want to start by just expressing our gratitude to staff. We've had a really good time working with Randy and Rick and Mark and Scott. Everybody's been really good cooperating through this process from the beginning of this project, which was May of last year. So just quick gratitude there, and I'll jump into my presentation. Real quick on the location, just to reiterate, this is west of 35th Avenue and south of 37th Street. It's old Weedman and Tuscany farms that are being developed and talked about tonight. And then a quick summary on kind of where we've been. I mentioned that we had submitted in May for the annexation. We got approval for that annexation in August. At the same time, we got approval for the zoning. And then in September, we came back to you guys for approval of the preliminary plan and the PUD, which kind of set the groundwork for what we'll talk about tonight. The overall site is 114 acres. And at that time, we talked about a density of 7 units per acre. And so with this filing, we're proposing about a 5-unit per acre density. So we're within that requirement we talked about before, adhering to our guidelines. Angela mentioned this, but this filing contains single family and townhomes or single family attached, whatever you'd like to call those. So that's 2 of the 3 product types that were approved in the PUD. We are still considering Allywood for a future phase. We'll talk about this a bit more later, but this has 3 identity features. So the overall requirement for the development was 4. With this first filing, which is about a third of the project, we're proposing 3. So we're kind of trying to go above and beyond with each filing. And then we have talked about a non-potable system, which is a condition of our development agreement and water service agreement. And then the last item I want to mention is just that in September, we approved a set of design guidelines that will dictate quality within the development, and we're really confident in those. I just want to reiterate those are in the packet on page 65, and so that handles some of the architectural items, and et cetera, for the district. Quick overview of the PUD that was approved, preliminary plan, in September, just to kind of touch back on this. This included a lot of the trail connections. I won't get into each of them. We did have a central park, which is up here, in the top. This will have the non-potable pond, and that'll be a main central park along 37th Street. That'll coincide well with the improvements that the city is proposing along 37th, enhanced landscape setback there to really create a nice entrance. We'll also have identity features, like I mentioned, throughout. We'll get in just a second, we'll get into the filing 1 identity features, but overall, we're sticking to the plan we submitted previously. And then just a reminder that this will be a Metro District community, which will help with keeping quality control enforcement of some of the guidelines we have. So now jumping into what we're reviewing tonight, filing 1 includes 3 phases, which Angela mentioned. So I'm going to start with the filing boundary. That's this dashed line that's on the outside of the project, and that's what we're platting tonight, and that's what is the overall approval. Within that, from a construction standpoint, and as we discuss the development agreement later, we have 3 phases. So we have a 1A, a 1B, and a 2, and so that's going to depend on the market and our absorptions, but our intention is to start with 1A, 1B in the coming month. So that's kind of where we stand on that. But again, the overall filing is the entire plat that's in the packet. Within that, identity features that we've added are a sculpture garden, a picnic pavilion area, and a dog park, and I'll just kind of point those out quickly. So over here will be the sculpture garden and park area. Dog park will be down here next to our large detention with some trails, and then within the townhome complex we'll have a park pavilion area as well. The trails that we committed to in the overall PUD will be constructed and phased appropriately, so they're not going to all be built day one, but we are working with staff to make sure those are phased. We also have a lot of coordination with some of the off-site construction projects associated with 37th Street, so working hand in hand with staff to make sure that's constructed at the right timing. And then the non-potable pond will be constructed with phase one because it's a requirement of the development agreement. That park will be phased in later phases, but we'll be constructing a portion of it for the non-potable. And that enhanced setback for the entrance will be constructed again. We have to coordinate that design with the 37th Street design that the city is doing. I wanted to quickly go over what we had talked about in September, which is just this overall imagery we're using to kind of guide our design and the landscape plans. This isn't any specific place within the development, but this is kind of the natural concept we're looking for, and so you'll see this represented in our landscape plans as they're built out. And then we, based on staff direction, really wanted to look at native species, native corridors for our regional trail connections. And so again, this isn't a specific location on the map, but this is kind of what we're looking for when we look at the regional trail connections, north-south and east-west to the development. I think that's everything on the layout, but happy to answer questions. So then I just wanted to touch quickly on what we're asking for tonight. We are requesting approval of the Liberty Draw Filing 1 final plat, and then subsequently tonight on the agenda are the development agreement and water service plan. I did want to just note that we agree to all the conditions that are in the staff report. We'll make sure to wrap everything up with staff appropriately. With the approval of the final plat tonight, we will work with staff on final paperwork, and then we will look to commence construction in the coming weeks. So we're really excited to be out there and get started on this for the Evans community. And then the last item is just to reiterate how much we value the relationship with the City of Evans and the process so far, and that we're looking forward to being here for 5-6 years and more. So with that, I can answer questions, and I have Andy and Zach to help me.
Great, thank you. Is there any questions or any questions of staff or the applicant, Mayor Pro Tem?
I think my only question would be on the conditions of approval, the 3-month maximum. Is that a standard time frame?
Yes.
Was that a yes? Sorry.
Yes, she said yes.
Perfect. That was really it. I think everything else looks straightforward, so thank you.
Any other additional questions of staff and or the applicant? Councilmember Neal?
Remind me where you're gonna be able to pull your non-pot from?
Thank you. There's a Glick system lateral that comes across 37th Street, and it'll deliver water along 37th to a pond.
Thank you.
Any other additional questions?
I just want to know, was it staff or was it the developer who came up with the dog park in their plan?
I know that when subdivisions come in, they have to get so many neighborhood amenity points, and a dog park is one of the ways to do that. I was not here when this was discussed.
Okay.
So.
I just want to say whoever has incorporated that, fantastic, because I think that we need more neighborhood dog parks. So I just want to say thank you to whoever decided to put that into the design.
Thank you. We think it's a good location given the townhomes there and the open space. People can kind of multi-purpose. So appreciate that feedback.
My question, actually a couple questions are, can you remind us when you are hoping to start the development? Is it sometime May, June this year, or is it earlier?
So we'll start construction of the horizontal development in the coming weeks, as I mentioned. Our goal would be to be pulling permits in July, August, and hopefully having homeowners in Evans this year.
Awesome, great. My next question for you is, besides doing metro districts and home like this, do you do grocery stores?
In a previous life, I know what you guys are going through, and we're here to be a point of discussion, but we don't do grocery stores.
No. Just thought I'd ask.
I do appreciate also the ID features, like how you're incorporating, xeriscaping and the natural, grasses and stuff to your design. That is great. I think within our city, we definitely need, our order. I'm sorry?
Say that.
Okay. Oh yeah, we're still in that.
Yeah.
I apologize.
That's okay.
I'll save it.
All right, because this is a public hearing, I'd ask if there's anybody in the audience that wishes to come up and speak in favor of this item or against it. If so, please come up to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, I will close the to the public hearing and council discussion. Go ahead.
As I was saying, I got ahead of myself. No, I do appreciate the ID features. Those are great, and especially within our city, is just having some kind of art or just a place where people can go to and see something different outside of what we have is great. And incorporating that within, your build is great to see. I'm excited to see what that looks like.
And I'm actually, again, in favor of this, and I really appreciate the speed of how quickly this project has come through, and we're finally getting to that construction phase and permit pulling here in the next few months. So I'm looking forward to seeing that happen. So
I want to just make one comment. I know that the developer said that the original intent was 7 units per acre, and now it's 5 units per acre. And I am very thrilled with that because, we have parking issues and we seem like everybody's crammed on top of each other. And I know it makes it so that the developer does not make as much money, for the units, 2 less units per acre. But it's really visually nicer for the community and also for the neighbors to go and feel like they have more of a home space when they purchase their property.
absolutely. If there are no additional comments, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve resolution number 08-2023 with the suggested conditions of approval and development standards as proposed.
I second.
I have a motion, a second, to approve resolution number 08-2023 with suggested conditions of approval and development standards as proposed. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. All right, thank you. Moving on, item number 7, consideration of approval of the development agreement for the Liberty Draw development. We will hear from staff.
All right, thank you, Mayor and council members. Now that the final plat has been approved, there are 2 remaining items related to Liberty Draw on tonight's agenda. The first of those, the second item for Liberty Draw, is the consideration of the development agreement. This is the development agreement for that first phase of the development that Mitch and Angela spoke of. It's outlined here in red. It's those 226 total units, 110 single family, 116 townhomes in this unit. So there will be subsequent development agreements as these phases come online. They'll look substantially like this one, but they will have different improvements, public improvements listed along the way. The only thing that's a bit unusual about this is the timing. The developer does request your approval of the final plat and the development agreement tonight. That will then enable them to close on one of the properties, the Wiedemann parcel, tomorrow, followed by the Road Armor parcel on March 2nd, and their execution of the development agreement on March 3rd. So there's a bit of a delay, about a 10-day delay here, but by the end of next week, all of these final plat, development agreement, and then the next item that we'll talk about in just a moment would be concluded. So as I mentioned, this is very much like the development agreements you've seen elsewhere. The term of this one is a little bit longer. It's 5 years instead of the standard 3 years, so that it coincides with the annexation agreement. So those are running on the same clock. The public improvements for these first 3 phases, phases 1A, 1B, and 2, are included, and there will be those future development agreements for future phases. It does include a standard 115% performance guarantee. This one is in the form of a subdivision bond that has been approved by the city attorney. And we do have some slight changes in the public improvements that need to be done prior to the first building permit. At the applicant's request, we are allowing them to proceed to first building permit with commitment from the utility providers for the dry utilities. Everything else needs to be in, but the dry utilities can be concurrent with the building of the properties. However, all the public improvements, including those dry utilities, need to be in before the first certificate of occupancy. So that's a way for them to get into the ground, get going vertically, while still working with the natural gas and electricity providers. The performance guarantee has been offered and will be accepted for any incomplete landscaping, any landscaping that's committed in this phase that can't be put in because it's happening after October during the winter season, for instance. There'd be a performance guarantee that be completed. We are asking for the standard 2-year warranty, and Exhibit C1 in your packet lists all of the obligations of both the city and the developer for this project. They are the standard obligations on the part of the developer, what you might expect in terms of the streets, alleys, emergency access, internal trails and sidewalks, the Ashcroft Draw sanitary sewer reimbursement that's related to this project, potable and non-potable water dedication and infrastructure, sanitary sewer infrastructure, private stormwater infrastructure, and participation in the public stormwater infrastructure that I'll speak about in just a minute. The city, per this development agreement, if you concur, would be responsible for the sidewalk along 37th Street as part of the 37th Street widening project that's currently scheduled in 2026. So the city would do that part of it. And then there would be shared responsibility for public stormwater infrastructure. By that, I'll show this brief diagram that shows that the development, and there's a blue line there as you see running along the northeastern side of the development. That is a section of stormwater pipe that would only be used by the city for the 37th Street development and any developments directly to the north across 37th Street. That pipe would not be used by this development. The development agreement would ask that the city pay the $138,500 necessary for that construction, go ahead and get it done this year, even though it's 37th Street, this phase of 37th Street would not be done for a couple years. That gets this done along with the other infrastructure. That will be, as you can see, immediately in the backyards of many of these homes, and so it won't be as disruptive as trying to construct this in a couple years. The proposal, and if you approve of this development agreement, your direction to staff would be to add that $138,000 to the next budget revision ordinance. There is funding in the 2024 budget, stormwater budget, to do this project, but we would need to advance that 1 year, move it to 2023 to get that section done. And you see this green line, and that is a section of combined, of shared stormwater. It is off-site, off the site of Liberty Draw, but shared equally by the development and by the city to get the rest of the stormwater off to Ashcroft Draw. That's a project that needs to be done either with the completion of the extension of Prairie View Parkway as it's coming through there in this location, which is a future phase for the developer, or the completion of the 37th Street project. That green line does need to be completed. Estimated cost of about $620,000 to be shared equally, about $311,000 for each party. We have not identified funding for that yet. It doesn't need to be identified, but as we approach that, as we get a signal that either the Parkway or the Prairie View Drive or the 37th Street are being widened, we'll come to council with perhaps a combination of funding sources. Either the Stormwater Fund, the capital fund, or there's about $235,000 in drainage impact fees that this project will be paying into the Drainage Impact Fund. So your designation of some portion of those in combination with some capital funds would take care of the city's portion of that. So with that, the city staff does recommend your approval of the development agreement. And as I mentioned, your approval of this development agreement will direct us to add that $138,000 to your next budget revision ordinance. Happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you, Randy. Any questions or comments from staff, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, my question is in regard to the off-site stormwater improvements that will serve Liberty Draw and the city storm drainage. How are we going about contracting for that? So really, I guess my question is, are we doing developer build on that piece? Is it district build and the developer will accept it, or is it going to be a bid contract from the city and the the district, just trying to understand the bid process that will happen with that line.
Okay, good. I'll address the first part, the city's portion, that blue line. We are suggesting that be developer build, but reimbursed, the city reimbursing the developer. Mitch or Mark, do you want to address the second question, please?
Did you hear that, Amanda?
Developer build and will reimburse?
Yes, for the $138,000 blue line, and I'm sorry you can't see that, but it's a northeast section of pipe that will only be used by the city.
Yeah, so the developer will reimburse, yes.
Okay, and then for the obligation on the $623,000 for which we'll pay half, how will that be bid and constructed?
I can handle that one. So I think, as Randy mentioned, the timing is going to dictate that. If we construct Prairie View prior to the city's 37th Street project, then it would be developer build and reimbursed by the city. So we would construct the full portion and be reimbursed the half from the city. And if the opposite happens and the city constructs that for their project, then we would reimburse the city in that format.
Were you able to get that?
Yes, that makes sense. So thank you.
Any other additional
We'll
questions?
know more about the timing in the next year or so.
Any other additional questions, comments from staff?
I have none. I don't think so after this presentation. Thank you. Well prepared.
All right, I don't either. Sounds pretty straightforward to me, so I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the Liberty Draw Development Agreement and authorize the mayor to sign the development agreement.
Second.
I have a motion, a second, to approve the Liberty Draw Development Agreement and authorize the mayor to sign the development agreement. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you. All right, next item. Item number 8, consideration of Liberty Draw Water Service Agreement. I'll hear from staff.
Yes, Mayor and Council, this is the third of the 3 items related to Liberty Draw for you this evening. This is the water service agreement. As you recall, the policy approach behind this agreement was discussed with you during your work session on January 17th, at which time you gave staff direction to proceed with the water service agreement that would allow for the combination of some EQRs and some Colorado Big Thompson River water to be provided by the developer, along with the city's acceptance of 5.5 shares of unchanged Greeley Loveland Irrigation Company water for the potable water for this project. City Attorney Scott Kropp took the lead in the drafting of this agreement, so I'll let him walk you through some of the highlights of it.
Can you put that graphic back up that shows the phases 1A, 1B, 1A, 1B, and 2?
That we had in the last the development agreement, please.
Good evening, members of council and mayor. Yes, the water service agreement is intended to address the water demands initially for filings 1A and 1B. And then after that, it will address filings 2 and continuing on through filing 5. There are 2 aspects to the water demand for the development. One is the potable water supply, and then the other is the non-potable water supply. And as Randy alluded to, the first part of the potable water supply will be for filings 1A and 1B. And those are coming from water sources that the city is absolutely comfortable with, uses all the time. It's either EQRs or CBT units. And they have enough EQRs and CBT to provide the water demand for filings 1A and 1B. And in fact, they have enough that there's a little bit left over for, not filing 1, phase 1A, phase 1B, and then there's enough left over for a little bit of phase 2. So the rest of phase 2 and then filings 2 through 5, their potable demand is proposed to be satisfied by the 5.5 GLIC shares that we talked to you about before. The problem with those is that they're irrigation rights now, so they need to be changed from an irrigation water right to domestic municipal uses, and we accomplished that through the water court, through a change case. And the water agreement, the water service agreement, provides that the city will handle that change case through the water attorney and the water engineer so that we have control of that application, but that will be paid for entirely by the developer. The water service agreement also provides that if for any reason, well, we anticipate that the water court will follow the methodology that we agreed to in the Windsor case. I don't know if you remember, we talked about how there's sort of this uniform approach to GLIC shares that we're going to try using going forward. And if the court accepts that and uses that to form the decree for this 5.5 GLIC shares, then that's sufficient to create the 106 acre-feet of demand that they need for phases 2 through 5. If not, then the obligation will be on the developer to bring additional water. So they can't build any of phases 2 through 5 until we finish that change case and that water is available. So till it's ready, they can't move forward. That's the potable side of the development. Then as far as the non-potable side of the development, there's about 77 acre-feet of water demand. And that we anticipate, as the developer mentioned, will come through additional GLIC shares or it could come from other sources. It's of less concern as far as the change case because if it's a potable water use and it's decreed for use in this area, we don't have to change it from irrigation. Its use as non-potable water is an irrigation use. So before they can proceed with each of those phases as they move forward and get their certificates of occupancy, they will have to provide a non-potable water source that's acceptable to the city. So, for example, even with phases 1A and 1B, as far as the non-potable source, they can't get their first CO until the non-potable source or non-potable system is built and until they provided us the water rights for the non-pot system. Because there is going to be both a non-potable system and a potable system, we're requiring dual metering throughout the development so that we can measure how much water is being used for potable and non-potable purposes. And I think those are my comments. I'd be glad to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments for staff, Mayor Pro Tem?
No questions from me, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes. Scott, how long does the change go through the water court? How long does that take typically?
It used to take way too long. I think our 2018 case where we changed the last set of GLIC shares was finally decreed in 2021. Two things have happened since then. The water court has changed its rules and set deadlines for cases to move through more quickly, and that the purpose of the new water court rules is to finish every case in 2 years. That's their goal. We anticipate that this case will take even less time because a lot of that 2 years was spent fighting among engineers about how much water should be generated by each GLIC share and going back to the old Wheeler study in the 1970s and all of that. With the Windsor Agreement, we eliminate that fight, hopefully. So we anticipate that it'll take about a year.
Okay, so we're not anticipating then having empty buildings that can't get certificates of occupancy because we're delayed in water court?
Well, for the potable side, they can't pull a permit until the water's done. So they'll be able to build phases 1A and 1B with the EQRs and the CBT water. That's all set. Then before they go on further from that, we'll have to have the decree before they get their first building permit to go beyond that. So they won't have any buildings constructed in reliance on the GLIC water until we have that decree.
I'm assuming they're probably working simultaneously to get that. That way there's no delay in the process of when they're ready to go to phase 2 or further, it's already in place.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned that. The anticipated timing on the change case, if the approvals go through tonight, they'll go ahead and convey the GLIC shares to the city within the next month or so, and we'll start that change case. So that will all be in process while they're building phases 1A and 1B.
Okay. I guess my main concern is I don't want anything to hold us up or hold this project up, and so that we have, building gung-ho for a little bit, and then it sits there like some of the other projects have done for 15 years without any progression.
Yeah, and frankly, and this may be getting more into the weeds than council wants to, But there are other mechanisms we can use if that, and I don't foresee that happening. But at the time that we file the change case, we can also file what's called an SWSP, a substitute water supply plan, which allows the division engineer to look at it and say, okay, you filed this change case, and while it's pending, we're going to let you go ahead and do what we anticipate you're going to be able to do at the end of the change case through the substitute water supply plan. So it lets you, in essence, to do it if you really need to, even before you get to your decree. Hopefully, we don't have to resort to an SWSP, but that's a mechanism that's available if we need it.
But that's good to know,
That's good to
yeah.
know, yeah. Any other additional questions, comments? Councilmember Neal?
Well, I have sat on council and have been very opposed to being placed in a situation of potentially creating another Tuscany. So I am always concerned when we're allowing them to build before we put in all the infrastructure. And so I've got some concerns about this. Scott, you've relayed a lot of them with the water issues, but, and I'm assuming that the dry utilities, they gotta have electricity and gas before they can sell a house. So, but I'm still concerned that we need to ensure that our developers are putting in all the utilities.
Yeah, and it really is a balancing act. I mean, on the one hand, you want to make sure that the developer can move forward as quickly as possible in a secure manner. There are two securities here. One is that we have the performance guarantee that if for any reason they don't finish some of the infrastructure, we can rely on that subdivision bond and the city can go ahead and do it. And then the other one is they can't get a certificate of occupancy until all of the infrastructure is in, and that includes both the ones that Randy talked about earlier, and the dry utilities, and the water system, and the non-potable system. So they can't really sell their first house until they've got everything in, and that's the second security.
Which is great, because it wasn't mentioned that through this first phasing, that infrastructure was gonna get built, and it was gonna attach to the pond. And so that's within the first phase.
Right.
Well, unfortunately, with Tuscany, the city didn't follow through with that, any of that.
Yeah, and in Tuscany,
That was different.
this happened before my time, so I can blame it on someone else.
Yeah.
They actually had a performance bond and they just let it lapse. And
Yeah.
so we've learned a very valuable lesson about monitoring those performance bonds.
And this developer also has a pretty good reputation, so they're not gonna leave us in limbo like that with Tuscany, so.
Right, yeah. Yep. Other questions?
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move to recommend approval of the license and utility crossing. Oh,
Nope,
that's the
you're on
wrong
that
one.
one.
Go to the wrong.
You're ahead of yourself.
Someone else read it.
Okay, I move to approve the Liberty Draw Water Service Agreement and authorize the mayor to sign the agreement.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the Liberty Draw Water Service Agreement and authorize the mayor to sign the agreement. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thanks, Scott. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you.
You are. All right, next item on the agenda, item 9, consideration of approval of a development agreement with Brian L. Bunting. I'm not going to know how to pronounce this, so I'm going to say WASBLB-LP and Bunting Disposal Incorporated in association with a special use permit approved via resolution number 05-2023 for certain property located at 3315 and 3311 State Street, and we will hear from staff.
Angela Snyder, Community Development. This development regards the public improvements associated with the special use permit for Bunting Disposal Expansion, which was approved by City Council on January 17th via Resolution 05-2023. Bunting Disposal is located on 2 adjacent parcels, 3315 and 3311 State Street. This agreement was reviewed by internal departments and is consistent with the special use permit approval and the council direction that we received at the January 17th, 2023 hearing when this development agreement review was continued to make changes. So the covered improvements have been changed to include only the installation of the two concrete approaches. So these portions right here that enter into the public right-of-way. The landscaping is still there, but the landscaping in over here, as required in the 85 overlay, is still there, but it is being held accountable by notes on the plat. We added a note here that addresses landscaping, there, which is just standard, quoted the code that says if they don't get it in, they can give us a letter of credit or something at that time, but that it's handled by the note on the plat. I think, yes. And so then we also removed any reference to replacing the iron and chain link fences. We replaced that with the language here that is quoted directly from the code, that if an existing fence is damaged a certain percentage, then 50%, the damaged part needs to be replaced with a compliant fence. And if a certain percentage of the whole thing gets damaged, then the whole fence gets replaced with something that complies with the code. And we're hoping in the meantime, before that fence should get destroyed, that we look at what is an acceptable fence in that Highway 85 overlay, so that we're not putting in a wood fence here that would not be good for the applicant. So those changes were requested for the special use permit map to be made before it was recorded, which of course we're holding it to be recorded with this development agreement. The covered improvements that we do have are valued together at $19,440. The development agreement is for 115% of the cost of those public improvements. And the term is the standard 3 years for this type of a permit, which is compliant with the state vesting requirements. And then the warranty period is for 2 years following the completion of the required improvements, during which we only hold the 15%. A letter of credit was submitted by the applicant, and we are holding it. The letter of credit is for more money than they need it to be. We have told them they're welcome to come and, make it for a smaller amount, for just the amount for the concrete approaches, which is $19,440. But we do have a letter of credit for them. So staff does recommend approval of the development agreement.
Great. Sorry. Great, thank you. Any questions, comments of staff? Mayor Protem?
None from me, thank you.
Anybody else, any questions, comments?
I don't have any.
I don't have any either. Looks pretty straightforward to me. If there's not any questions or comments, I would entertain a motion. Not everybody jumping at once.
Okay. I move to approve the development agreement with Brian L. Bunting, WASLB LP, and Bunting Disposal in association with the special use permit approved via resolution number 05-2023, and authorize the mayor to sign the agreement.
Second.
I have a motion, a second, to approve the development agreement with Brian L. Bunting, WASLB LP, and Bunting Disposal in association with a special use permit approved via resolution number 05-2023, and authorize the mayor to sign the agreement. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Nay. Motion passes. Thank you, Angela. All right, moving on. Next item, item number 10, consideration of the Poudre Valley Rural Electric Authority utility crossing of the Evanstown ditch. We'll hear from staff.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. So Poudre Valley REA is currently undergrounding some of their fiber and electric lines throughout the city, and they approached us for an easement across the Evans ditch to do the work, and they signed a copy of the easement agreement and a $1,500 check as stipulated in the agreement. So we're recommending approval of the agreement, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments of staff, Mayor Pro Tem?
Nope, none from me, thank you.
Questions, comments?
I do.
Good.
Just need a clarification on dates. It says on number 3.7, the installation shall be completed by April 30th of 2022.
Oops.
When should the installation be completed?
Should be
by?
2023. They had actually approached us, and they gave us the check back in December. This just somehow slipped through the cracks and didn't get to council, but they should be done this spring, April 23.
Okay, and they're going underneath directional?
Underneath the ditch, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I move to recommend approval of the license and utility crossing agreement with Poudre Valley Rural Electric Authority for a proposed crossing of the Evanstown Ditch and authorize the mayor's signature on the agreement.
Second.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to recommend approval of the license and utility crossing agreement with Poudre Valley Rural Electric Authority for a proposed crossing of the Evanstown Ditch and authorize the mayor's signature on the agreement. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item, item number 11, consideration of change order request for lift station emergency overflow project. And we'll hear from staff.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. So this project, we have a little short slideshow. So as you know, we've been working on this project for quite a while, and we're finally wrapping it up. To give you a little history, on the picture on the left is an Google Earth image of the aerial lagoons. The picture on the right is looking south across the lagoons. Those buildings are the offices of, used to be the office for the wastewater. They store stuff there now. And then Kyle's office is in that building. Here's just some pictures of the construction as it progressed. The picture on the left is the area where the structure was, the overflow structure was constructed. Picture in the center is some of the biosolids before they were removed from the project. And the picture on the far right is some other shots of the construction with some biosolids. One of the big savings on the project was being able to strip the biosolids very efficiently and reduce our cost on that by about $200,000 overall. So that was on some serious effort between the design engineer and the general contractor. And then these two pictures are the pictures of the slab pour. They poured about 650 yards of concrete in about 12 hours. Started at 2 o'clock in the morning and they finished around noon. So this is a couple shots of that part of the project. It's 21 inches thick and it's got 2 layers of rebar, and it's a lot of rebar. And then these are several shots of the actual wall pour. We poured about 3 or 4 weeks after the slab was completed. And that again took a good portion of the day and multiple pumps and multiple trucks to get it completed. It was a very intense project trying to keep it going. There were some little hiccups here and there that we tried to work through with the contractor. And then because of that, one of the things we're going to talk about here in a minute, the project overall, the design was solid. The product that we have in the ground now, I believe, is a very solid product. And I think we have a very good long-term product for the overflow. The purpose of the overflow, I'll go back to that southern lagoon there, it was the original overflow. So if the lift station were to go down, power go down, we have backup power, but if that were to go down, we have to get back in there. The effluent would back up into that overflow pond, in this case, the actual pond. And then in the final case, the actual structure as it's completed. And I didn't draw a picture of the actual structure, but you can see it there. The walls are still up and formed, but now you have essentially, if you stood next to the structure right now, you could stand next to it and you look down. The wall's 9 feet tall, but you're standing 4 feet up. So you're looking down into those ladders all around for the guys to get in there and do the maintenance if they need to. So it's a very solid structure, and I think we got a good product in the end as working through the whole process. So the change order, what the change order involves is during the construction, we used helical piers in the design of the foundation for the slabs. And the way the project was designed, the helical piers, the geotechnical engineer gave the contractor, who is a subcontractor, to L4, the general contractor, the criteria for which to design the piers, based on the soils that we explored before the beginning, and then what was necessary to hold the foundation in place because of the groundwater in the vicinity. Because if you build something too light or with not enough foundation, with groundwater, it's gonna lift. And when things lift, especially when concrete lifts, they crack. And what we don't want is cracking, because if the effluent gets into the overflow structure and we have cracking, that effluent goes into the groundwater. So the purpose of the design was to mitigate that cracking. So during the construction process, when the contractor first started, we started drilling the helical piers, and essentially a helical pier looks like a very large screw that you screw into the ground, and then the foundation is attached to each one of those screws. And there's 169 helical piers within that 100 by 100 foundation. So they're about 6 to 8 feet apart on a grid. And so that was built into the ground, but during the construction, we were noticing one time, they put the bolt in the hole of one of the piles, and the bolt was supposed to be 1/16 of an inch smaller than the actual hole. And in fact, it was actually a 1/4 inch smaller, so which allowed for a little more play when the piles were pulled apart. So we were a little nervous about that during the construction. So we looked into alternatives, drilling deeper, adding different piers, adding additional piers to the project. What we came up with was and those are the recommendations by the contractor, but the structural engineer suggested another alternative, which allowed for that play in the helical piers, which was the thickened slab with additional rebar, so that when the system does move, it moves as one piece. And so it avoids this kind of motion when it moves. So that avoids the cracking that we don't want to see when the thing. So we opted for that solution to create a solid structure that we believe is going to last for a long time and not create any problems for us. So we overrode the contractor's choice for making that decision, hence the reason for the change order. He said, okay, you're telling us how to do this, so that's a change order for us. So as you know, this project ran a long, long time. And from the start of the project in early to mid 2020, and now we're finishing up in 2023. Part of it was delays in getting the materials. Part of it was weather issues. Part of it was other things that happened during the project. Because the helical piers, the company that brought us the helical piers, they're actually a Canadian company. And for the Davis-Bacon requirements, we were supposed to buy American. We got a waiver from that because the Buy American helical piers out of Arkansas were going to take 6 to 8 months, whereas we could get them off the shelf from, and I forget the city in Canada, but we can get them off the shelf and delivered here in 3 weeks from Canada. So we expedited that process. So bottom line is we're looking at the total cost of the project was over our project budget by about $23,000. The net change orders overall, I believe, resulted in a project that we can be satisfied with, that will guarantee us a good, solid overflow structure down the road if the lift station were ever to go down and we needed it to actually work. If you walk around inside that thing, it's a substantial structure. And if you ever want to look at all the pictures, we've got hundreds of pictures because we photographed all the rebar, everything. It's just the engineers and us. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Might have to go down there and take a look at it. All right, thank you. Any questions or comments of staff, Mayor Pro Tem?
Nope, none from me. Thank you.
Anybody? Questions, comments?
Yes, I have a quick question. I see there's adjacent land in the area. Do you foresee us constructing a one in the near future?
The remainder of the land will still be owned by the city of Evans.
Yes.
We can't build on it. You can't build a house on it or anything like that because it was a former lagoon system for wastewater.
Right.
It could be used in the future for sporting fields or something like that. One of the next projects you'll see, well, you won't see it for a little while, but we have a storm sewer that's proposed to go through the project sites, somewhere in this vicinity right there. It'll go east-west across the project to daylight our 35th Street storm sewer outfall to the river. And that project, when you see that go in, the pipe will actually be more or less at grade, and we'll build a berm over the top of it. Okay. So essentially creating 2 separate potential ball fields.
Okay.
So Mark, why would not ordering the correct size bolts be more efficient and cost efficient than pouring in extra concrete. I know that rebar and concrete is very expensive. Bolts to me, the right size bolts would probably, it seems to me, would be not as expensive for the city to.
Well, they had about 115 of the helical piers in before that we caught that. We weren't out there on a day-to-day basis. We were out periodically during construction. So we put in about 85% of the helical piers with the wrong size bolt. So the last 15% had the right size bolts. So there was no going back and pulling them out and putting them back in the ground again. That would have just been, we would have destroyed the entire site to do that. And then most of those piers would have been ruined, and we would have had to buy more material to replace those.
So we were the ones who discovered that there was instability with the bolts.
Yes.
So why was the contractor not the person to discover this after installing 80 of them?
I don't know why he didn't notice that. I don't know.
Because that leads me to question the rest of the quality of the project. Are we going to have problems with it in the near future?
I don't believe so. I think I was out there for the entire slab pour, and I watched most of the wall pour, and I walked around and climbed up and down on all the walls when they were getting the forms ready and all the rebar ready, and that was done very well.
So you got on site after?
For the slab and the walls, I was on site myself.
Okay. So I just have, concerns about it, and I just want to voice those concerns publicly about it. So thank you very much.
I mean, yeah, I would have to agree with that. I mean, does that really, I mean, regardless of how they poured it and all the rebar and everything that's out there, that does not affect the structural integrity of the project going down the line and cause any system failures, any failures at all?
When the foundation was originally designed, it was assumed there would be a certain amount of deflection within the piers when you pull them apart, that they would move. The tolerance wasn't within realm when we had the 16-inch slab. So adding that additional 5 inches of concrete and the additional rebar, because I think we actually went from number 5 rebar to number 6. So it's an 1/8 of an inch bigger in diameter. So that was substantial enough to, the slab itself, in addition to the helical piers, will reduce the chance substantially of any deflection that's different. We want it to do, like I said before, we want it to go up and down as one piece.
But if in the future, say, for example, 10, 12 years down the line, there is a failure and it's deemed to be part of using the, incorrect size bolts, where would the liability fall upon to correct that mistake? Or
Well, in the future, if there is any cracking, we can do some surface level corrections like sealing to prevent any leakage down into the groundwater. But I don't believe that the foundation and the structure as constructed will fail. I believe it is a solid structure, and the additional design and effort that we put into making that thicker slab will counterbalance the bolt differential on the hole size.
Yeah, and just to elaborate on the liability issue, my understanding is that when we identified this problem, that Mark then had an engineering firm look at solutions, and that an engineering firm I think it was Lithos Engineering, recommended the concrete slab solution. So if that were to fail, then we would probably go back to Lithos Engineering and look to them.
So the original engineering would have sufficed had there not been a bolt problem?
Yes.
Who was the original engineer?
Lithos Engineering.
The same engineer?
Yes.
What else have they built in the city?
This is the first
project
that they've done in the city.
Do we have any more lift stations planned?
Not at the moment. This lift station is a little different because of it's taking so much of the city's waste. So this one, that's why the structure is so large. Any other lift stations that we would have planned, for instance, if we do a lift station on the south side of the river at County Road 394 and 35, County Road 35, that lift station will be very large. And that lift station will have to require an intensive overflow structure just because of the size of it. Smaller lift stations, a lot of those can be handled with just submersed big tanks, like 30, 40,000 gallon tanks that can be put underground and then pumped out when you're ready to. So for anything like that, it would be a separate design. And a larger lift station, we would also look at it from a design build standpoint versus this was a design bid build, where we would have the designer work together with a contractor because there's more complication in such like a big lift station like that. Similar to when we go out to do the wastewater plant expansion, we're going to have a designer, we're going to have a contractor on board during the design to help facilitate the best design so that we know that it's constructible, we know that it's maintainable, and it gives us the best bang for our buck. So that would be the way we would do any more projects that are this complicated.
Okay, and then with that in mind, south of the river, it's also going to be in a flood zone.
Exactly.
So the same exact kind of.
Same issues will
substrate.
happen, the groundwater will be an issue.
So the next thing that I have too is probably more for the management of this is, I guess I just don't, historically, we've gotten contracts on a project and the city council has signed off on it, and then the next time that we hear about it is when there's trouble. We don't have anybody in the city historically managing these projects and going and visiting them on a near daily basis. So then we find out later that the 80 bolts into it, it's not working. So in the next projects, are we anticipating having somebody from city staff checking on the project to make sure that we don't get that far into a whoopsie daisy?
Yes, on all future, up except for this project, we've had people on every other project on a day-to-day basis. But we were so swamped between Idaho Street and 23rd Avenue and other projects, we weren't able to get over.
So we're asking for more projects, so it looks like we need to do less projects.
Also, some of the projects we're hiring, like 37th Street, we have a consultant on board who will be there 8 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Okay.
And then we will.
This 37th project, the last 37th Street project, we had the same issue. So we didn't find out, they had to come and get more money from city council because we had issue with the contractor and nobody was managing it. So I just hope that in the future that we can have some close management of this so that we don't get that far down the rabbit hole of a bad project.
Understood.
That's mostly to you guys.
Right.
I agree with everything that Councilmember Spear just said, but I do want to say thank you for at least consulting other engineering regarding that and, at least taking their recommendations and everything like that to at least mitigate the issues that could arise in the future. But at least, thank you for your due diligence on that, so.
I was just curious because, so I was looking at kind of just to understand like the bolt components of it. So in essence, it's like retrofitting when you retrofit a house. That's what I'm kind of understanding the way it looks when you're creating this. So we added an additional, so we mitigated by adding additional rebar and concrete, which is also tends to be like a porous component. Prior to that, did we add any kind of waterproofing component in the event that there would be an issue with water in the future?
So the concrete wasn't added, the design was just increased. So when we decided to go to the 21-inch slab, we built it all in one pour.
Oh, okay.
So we didn't add concrete to the structure. No, I would never do that.
Okay, that's what I was just making sure.
I would never add concrete on top of concrete.
Okay, good. So it's just the whole thing with rebar.
Right. No, it's
all.
all. It was. And I don't have picture. It's kind of hard to see here where they're pouring the slab, but you can kind of see the rebar in there. But they're out there and they're standing on the rebar. That's how stout it is, and they're pouring it 21 inches. Those forms around the outside are 2 foot tall, and the concrete is down, and then and they started at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they poured straight through till 12, and poured about 650 yards of concrete. So 65 trucks delivered.
Okay.
So Better. So Mark, how long can the lift station be down before we've
That's a good
got
question. I don't remember the
overflow
exact number.
out of the, like, we have a no flush from this side
No,
down
we
again?
wouldn't have a no flush, no, we wouldn't have a no flush, but,
We've had one before.
well, yeah, that one, yeah, I mean, that was, I don't remember the exact number, but this pond, for want of a better word, would fill up 9 feet deep before it overflows. That's how deep the actual structure is. So I believe I don't want to give you an answer that's not right, but it's an extended period of time. And that allows Robbie and his crews to get up there, either get the backup power going with the generators or restoring the actual electricity. And the generators will kick on immediately when the power goes down, so that gives you some time right there. The generators just don't have the capacity to go for more than, I don't know what their diesel capacity is on those generators.
So have you guys tested that then? Because I mean, I don't want the test of the generators or the backup power to be, our shit's not flowing uphill. That's
Right.
when I don't want the test.
Yes, I understand. So during the time when there was no overflow structure, that's what we kept pushing the project forward to get it done, rather than changing gears and try to pull everything out and reinstall it. The lift station never went down, and to my knowledge, the lift station hasn't gone down since it was operational, but I haven't been here since it was operational.
Okay, yeah, I mean, because like my confidence right now in it is like pretty low. So I don't want to be in that situation where we had bolt problem and now we've got pump problem.
Understood.
I know you're not pumping it, so you're just here getting the questions.
Understood.
All right, if there are no, any additional questions or,
Yes, I have a quick one. What's the inspection cycle on something like this, the project? Like, do we have anything?
During the helical pier installation, I would have had somebody, ideally, I would have had somebody on site 2 or 3 hours a day.
Daily.
And and then for the rebar, you just show up every day for a little while and check the rebar and make sure they're doing it properly. And then before they pour, you walk it one more time with the crew. And then the same with the walls. You're walking all the time when you're there on a daily basis and checking as they proceed. And then before we poured, we had them adjust and poke and pull some of the rebar to make sure that it had the proper clearance away from the forms. Because you want to have that minimum 2-inch clearance from any surface before they pour. So that sometimes they have to jam 2x4s in there, and then when the concrete comes up, they yank it out to make it so that we have the proper clearance. So yeah, we kind of took on more than we had the manpower to do on this one. So we'll be a little more cautious on that. Or in future projects where we know we want full-time observation, we'll hire out somebody to be a full-time observer.
Was your question that, or was your question, because I took your question as, do we have to have this lift station inspected in the future?
Yes, pertaining to that.
Oh, the lift station. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't
specific.
understand
Yes,
your question.
upon completion of the project, I was like to know if there's gonna be like a future inspection, the intervals of inspecting this project, like every quarter, every year.
Robbie and his crew will inspect, and they're out there on a daily basis anyways, checking the lift station. But they'll go down the ladders and walk through the structure and keep tabs on it and make sure it's still crack-free.
Crack-free, that's a little concerning.
Yeah.
So, well, one last thing, is there a special sealant applied to, on top of the concrete, a topical sealant, the industry? Some things.
There are some sealants that we can use to, if cracks do happen, that we can use to seal the cracks, and then we would seal the entire surface.
Okay, I hope you wouldn't have to remove the waste to get to those particular cracks. Somebody basic.
We would, if we had to do that, we would. But we would, I think Robbie and I will have to come to like a quarterly inspection of it, send somebody down the ladder every quarter and walk it, and take photos.
All right, you answered my question. Thank you.
all right, if there are no additional questions or comments, I'd entertain a motion. I'll jump in on once.
One last question, just based on, if you don't mind, based on the situation that we just talked about with how we mitigated, what is the life of this project now with that new condition?
I expect it to be there for 100 years.
Okay, just making sure.
Or the next one.
Okay.
All right, I'd entertain a motion.
I move to approve the change order in the amount of $282,610.12 above the not to exceed limit of the contract for the 2019 Lagoon Decommissioning Project for a final contract amount of $2,492,291.76.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the change order in the amount of $282,610.12 above the not to exceed limit of the contract for the 2019 Lagoon Decommissioning Project for a final contract amount of $2,492,291.76. All of those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Reports. Item number 12, City Manager.
Yes, Mayor and Council, I do have a few items for you tonight. First off, if you recall here about a week or so ago, I did send out an email to the City Council proposing a weekend work session coming up on Saturday, March 11th at Riverside Library Boardroom from 9 a.m. to noon. The purpose of this is to review the Economic Development Strategic Plan with the City Council and to get feedback from the governing body. I have asked that, Pro Sono staff will be in attendance, and I've also asked department heads to attend as well, so we can have a good, well-rounded conversation. So I'm used to Kansas law in setting a special meeting. I don't know if that necessarily applies to Colorado, but I did want to put it out there on the City Council's radar for March 11th at the Riverside Library, 9 to noon.
All right. I'll request a special meeting for that from our clerk, so sounds good.
Okay, next item, the Finance Committee, here just about a week or so ago as well, maybe 2 weeks ago, I sent out an email to the Finance Committee. I believe Ally and Brian, I believe you guys.
Yes, I got the email.
You're on the Finance Committee. So we are planning our first meeting for Tuesday, February 28th via Microsoft Teams, 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. So we can go over kind of what that schedule looks like for the Finance Committee as we near the budget season, and to review some city investments with you as well. So I'm assuming that day works for the two of you.
Yeah, I sent an email, I think it was today, responding to that, saying it works for me.
Okay,
Yeah.
very good.
That works for me too.
Very good, perfect. I can see here at my station, I've got my ticket for the Greeley Area Chamber of Commerce annual dinner. Allison and I were talking about this the other day. She was going to reach out to try to confirm who was going to be there at this in case we have any leftover tickets, in case we need to reallocate those. So Allison may very well be reaching out to you here coming up within the next day or so. And then the last thing I've got, based on the weather coming in, we met with we sat in on a meeting with the National Weather Service here this afternoon. With the weather coming in, City Hall will be closed tomorrow, February 22nd, due to the inclement weather. We're not really sure what to expect in terms of the depth of snow, but there is great concern for the the significant drop in temperatures, but also freezing material as well. So due to hazardous travel conditions, City Hall will be closed tomorrow. Essential operations, police, streets will be out clearing the roads, trying to make that as safe as possible. And then the plan is, weather permitting, that City Hall will be open for normal operations Thursday morning. So, Mr. Mayor, Council, that's all I've got for you tonight.
All right, great, thank you, Cody. All right, next, City Attorney.
I have nothing to add tonight. Thank you, Council.
All right, great, thank you. All right, next item on the agenda, audience participation. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to address City Council on any item? Seeing none, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. All right, you too. We'll talk to you soon. All right.
I see they took extra.
Okay, so what are you saying?
I see they took extraordinary measures to
I know, I had that.
Yes, but I did bring my laptop. Just in case.
information about